Ladies, gentlemen, others, and undecideds. I'm briefly going to introduce things here. I won't waste too much of your time, but I just want to set the tone of things very briefly. So, my name is Bill Appleby. I'm from Australia, if you haven't figured that out by now. I was pleased to note that they were celebrating the grand final here down in Banff on Friday night. I missed that, so Australia and Canada share a great deal in common. VPAC, the organisation that I'm the CEO and Chief Scientist of, is almost like a sister organisation to Cyvera. We've been working with Cyvera now for 4 to 5 years, and it's been great for both of us. It's always great to, and I'm on the International Strategic Advisory Board at Cyvera, so we're working very closely, sharing ideas. I mean, this is the 3rd time I've been to this conference, and it's always been a great event for me because it's a fairly small, intimate group where we can sort of share ideas on the latest in terms of trends and technology in IT, advanced computing, e-research, cyber infrastructure, and where it's going. And it's small enough that you have a finite probability of being able to see the same person twice in the time that the conference is running. Unlike, for example, supercomputing, where some of you may have been to, where it's 10,000 people, where it's all a probabilistic sort of event or a show. So, in particular, I think the scene about all this is, where is ICT going? Big data, clouds, pervasive infrastructure, and as I like to say it, everything is a service. Things are moving so fast these days. You know, there are initiatives in Australia going which parallel what's going over here. There's the Virtual Australia initiative to basically digitise all of the property data of all the properties in Australia and put it all online in 3D in collaboration with all the property data. I mean, eventually the virtual world is going to be paralleled by the physical world almost completely. There are issues of security, of privacy, of services, of government, of universities, and how all that fits together. So what I hope will come out of this conference, and what I know from previous expectations, is a lot of great ideas coming out, and a lot of good interactions, and a lot of building communities, which is what this conference is all about. So with no further ado, I hand over to Robin, who is essentially, as you know, the president and the CEO of Cyvera, who's the brains trust of all this. So go for it.
Thanks, Bill. It's always a treat having Bill with us because he gives us a different perspective, and there's, as he was saying, there's a lot of parallels between VPAC and Cyvera, so we really do appreciate having with us. Today we had meetings for Cyvera with our International Strategic Advisory Committee. Try saying that 4 times quickly. And we also had a board meeting. Lots of good discussions. Today I come away with more on my plate than I started with. And of course, if that happens to you every day, you're done for. But you know, we'll get through that one. They've given us lots and lots of good input, so we know where we're going, or at least we got some ideas where we're going. Part of what we'd like to get out of this conference, that's I'm speaking about the Cyverans here, is we really like to get your input on where we should be going. So it's going to be a great conference, lots of interesting discussions, but I'd really like you to take the time to think about where you see your interaction with Cyvera and how we can be helpful. So that's, there's booths out front, there's lots of Cyverans around, talk to us, give us that feedback. Really appreciate it. This event is hosted by Cyvera, but it's not about Cyvera, it's about all of you. And we've got a community of leaders here. Lots of people are here because they've got some input, they've got some influence, and the theme of leadership in the age of big data really comes up again and again. It's those of us who are here that get out, that say that we can do certain things and get on with doing it, that make things happen. Lots of people sit back and just watch and wait. I'm hoping that this room is full of leaders and we're going to have influence as we go forward. So let's have lots and lots of good discussions. Most of the year we're immersed in projects. This is the time that we look up, we take stock, we get inspired, and we have an amazing list of presenters. You've been looking at some of their bios. We're going to start out with a plenary tonight, which I think you're going to find fascinating. But I'm really excited to have all of these presenters. We've also got a great line of moderators, and the moderators actually don't get any recognition in the program, so we want to recognize them here tonight. We've got Craig Richardson from Advanced Micro Devices, Jasmine Blarty from Beakerhead, and for those of you who haven't heard of Beakerhead, before you leave this conference, find out what Beakerhead is. If you don't know, it's fun, it's amazing, and Jasmine and various other people will be more than happy to tell you about it. Karen Young is here from Alberta Innovates Technology Futures. Chris Perry, president of the Grow the Energy Circle, and our surprise star speaker of last year's summit, where he was talking about the relevance of IT and remote sensing on potato farming. Chris is a potato farmer. Not the sort of guy you often run into at an IT type conference, but amazing when you see how all of this technology actually gets applied. So really interesting guy. John Longbottom is here from the Smartest City Strategy Leader at IBM Canada. Jill Kowalchuk, known to many of you, a past, well technically current Cyberan, who's on secondment just now with Compute Canada. And so Jill, that's known to many of you. And Peter Singadon, from Cisco Systems, but also currently the vice chair of the Cybera board. So those are great people. We'll recognize them. We're going to get to talk to a lot of them. There are also some fabulous people here. Well, not here. Some fabulous people who wanted to be here but couldn't make it. So we don't want to leave them out. So let me just introduce to you one of our board members, Andy Barron. Andy, can you come on over here?
Hi, Robin.
Here's Andy. Dressed in the snappy 8-bit tie. And we wanted to make sure that, that Andy and others could join us. So some of our sessions are going to be streamed on the web. We're going to do some recording. Thanks, Andy. And you're looking kind of lost, Andy. I think the drinks are over that way. So, did you want to say a couple of words, Andy?
I did want to say a couple of words, Robin.
You have the floor, my friend.
I'll say how sorry I am that I wasn't able to be with you. A family situation has come up, a very happy one, but nonetheless, unfortunately, it means that I can't be in Banff for this year's summit. But hopefully I'll be able to return next year. You've got a fabulous program. Your staff have worked very hard on this program, and I'm really sorry I'll be missing it. But hopefully I'll be back with you next year. I look forward to that.
Well, thanks, Andy. Glad you could join us even a little bit tonight, and congratulations on being a grandpa.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
I think we can give a round of applause for Andy. So, as you can see, this is meant to be 2 days of discussion, even if you're not here in person. So, tell your friends and colleagues that all day tomorrow will be webcast live on the Cybera website. You can also follow the conversation on Twitter at Cyber Summit, not Cybera Summit, at Cyber Summit. I might have got the first tweet out this morning with pictures of the sunrise on the mountains, but I probably won't have the last one. I hope I won't. So we start tonight and we end on Wednesday midday with plenary discussions. They're designed to provoke. I know that there's a bunch of provocative speakers here tonight, and you're going to want to enjoy those conversations and stay right to the end, because that closing plenary is going to set you off home on the right foot with really a spring and a call to action. So over the course of the 2 days, we want you to get involved. So how are you going to do that? Well, obviously, first in the sessions, speak up. Please, interact. Do remember, however, that we are taping some of this, webcasting some of it. So if you've got a burning question, you want to call it out, that's okay. But if you can wait for the mic to be passed to you, then it'll bet you be recorded and heard by people who are not here physically. And that just helps them to really participate more. But this really is a 2-day conversation. I want it to be casual. Many of you know that I rarely leave the house without a tie. I've even lost the tie this time, so we're setting the conversation the way that it should go. Second, in shaping Cybera's future, I talked a little bit about the fact that we're really looking for some input. We've got a booth by the registration desk. If you can take like 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes to tell us how we can add value to your organization, what you're striving for, that would be great. Thirdly, you can get involved by shaping next year's summit. If you tell us what works, what doesn't work, what you'd like to see, Again, there's folks at the registration desk who would be happy to get that feedback. And speaking of the registration desk, there are things to do there, some cool things to do. For those of you who haven't seen it, there's a guess how many jelly beans are in the jar for our big data challenge. I've been told that as the president of Cybera, I'm not really eligible to win the prize. But I really, really have a passion for mathematical geometric puzzles. So I've been told that if I get the exact number, then I might be eligible. The rest of you just have to get the closest number. So that's a fun prize. So drop by any time with any problems you have, questions, concerns, or to place your bet on the jelly beans. In the lobby and the reception lounge, you'll also find information booths about the sponsors of our event. We really couldn't do this event without sponsors, so I'd like to thank our summit sponsors, our platinum level sponsors, the folks we work with all the time, Alberta Innovates Technology Futures. In Calgary, our offices are in the Tech Futures building. We work very closely with the Tech Futures people. Canary, our federal counterparts, are essential in building the cross-Canada network. And from industry, we have both HP and AMD as platinum sponsors, and we'd like to thank them very much. At the gold level, we have iCanada. iCanada, terrific organization. I'm part of it on their board of governors. If you haven't heard about iCanada, I urge you to find out more through the summit. We try and build intelligent communities across the country. Silver level sponsor, Tessera. Tessera is a company that we work with quite a bit. It's been very instrumental in helping us build the Water and Environment Hub. Amazing project, and lots of Tessera peoples here. And bronze sponsors, Arista, NMAX, IBM, Rogers, Shaw, all of these sponsors really helping us to put on the event. So thank you very much to the sponsors. I'd actually ask you to give them a round of applause. We really do appreciate them. So that's it for the housekeeping stuff. And probably, maybe the last time you'll see me using notes through the presentation. But I have a lot to remember. So we're going to jump in and start with the first session. And as you can see, rather than doing a podium, we've got some comfy chairs here. This is, and I'd actually suggested that we have mugs of coffee as well, but that didn't happen. Although I think Megan offered to bring me a glass of water. I would exasperate to look earlier when I mentioned coffee. Yes, she's nodding. But there we go. So we're going to have sort of a panel here, but we're not going to do the bit where we all sit at the table and pass the mic and so on. I want it to be a conversation. So we're going to start out with Nancy. Nancy Flam is the project director for the Department of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism for the province of Nova Scotia. She's a certified management accountant with a master's in public administration and more than 25 years of experience working with all levels of government. I'm right about that, Nancy, right? All levels, yeah? Really relevant to what we're doing here tonight, in 2007, she developed a provincial broadband strategy and was appointed project director for implementation of the Broadband for Rural Nova Scotia project. That's a provincial last mile initiative. And by mid-2010, Nova Scotia boasted 100% broadband coverage. That is a very, very impressive number, and one that we haven't reached in Alberta. That serves thousands of Nova Scotians living in hundreds of unserved and underserved coastal and interior rural communities. So I'd love to learn more about that. Nancy's going to kick us off on the project on the topic of is data the next oil? So without further ado, Nancy, I'll tell you who the rest of the panelists are as we get them up, in case you forget.
Okay, am I on?
You're on.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to speak with you this evening. I have to say, I haven't been in Banff. I was only in Banff once before, and I'm not going to tell you how long ago it was. That would give away too much information about me. But the interesting thing about being from the Eastern Canada and coming here, which is a 3-hour time difference, is that I was up in plenty of time this morning to see the sunrise. And you talked about coffee. I don't think I need any more. I'm not even a coffee drinker, and I'm still going a million. So hopefully we'll keep this under control. I just wanted to start off by talking about big data. It was interesting when I got the call and an invitation to come and speak about big data. I also wear another hat besides the project director for the Broadband Initiative. I'm a corporate strategist, and I work with a number of different sectors in the ICT world. I'm not a technology geek. I really know nothing about it. I'm more of a strategist. I like to think of myself that way. But it was interesting when asked this question, I started to think about it and say, so what is big data? So I spoke to some of my colleagues and I said to them, and some of my clients as well, I said, so tell me, is data the next big oil? That's the question I have to answer. So I'm going to look to some of you and get your input on that. And it was interesting because the big question that did come back to me was, so what is big data? Let's see if I can get this to move. No can do. Told you I wasn't technology savvy. Point it this way. Thank you. Anyway, it was interesting because I talked to the traditionalists, the people that have the big data centers, and they basically said to me that big data is a provenance of those with big databases. They're like big enterprise, our researchers that use it for scientific reasons, and Big Brother. Some people might also call that government. So that was very interesting to me. They in comparison to oil, they were saying, well, if from a big data perspective and large quantities of data, if you don't have it, you have a real challenge to get access to it. People don't actually have access, it's hard to access because we have this little policy called Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So they felt that and today, if you don't collect big data, or you don't collect data, you don't have access to it. I thought that was really interesting. Of course, yay, it moved. Coming into the 21st century and coming into today, and as we move forward, we look at big data from a different perspective. Big data is not just about volume, it's also about velocity and speed. So how do we move our data from one place to the other? For example, thinking about our radiologists and the opportunity to access data to read on screen their x-rays. Well, if we don't have the infrastructure in place, or they don't have the IT capacity, the computing capacity, then they don't have access. They consider that big data. But the most interesting point when I talk to people, they said, yeah, but today, big data is about information that comes from a variety of sources. With mobile devices and our social networks, there's information exchanging back and forth. So big data is coming from a number of sources. And when you think about it, we get it from our consumer websites, we get it on our mobile devices, we get data from our cars now, from airplanes. So it's really interesting to think about that. It's because of the affordability, I guess, the economies of scale and the agility, and I guess the accessibility that makes data really about big data. So I thought it was really interesting about what we considered big data. That was my big first question. So I guess it's not just about size and volume anymore from the traditional perspective. It's also about speed and how we can access it, the infrastructure in place, and the sheer volumes of it coming at us every single day. The other interesting point that was brought to my attention when we talked about is data the next oil, is the fact that oil is a natural resource, but big data is man-made. It's a byproduct of our digital era. But it's really important. Everybody all agreed that big data and access to big data was very important. So it was really important. Thank you. That's not the right one. Thank you. So if it's really important, then I guess we really need to understand how we can leverage our today's assets to move into the 21st century, from just using our 20th century, resources. So the real question is how do we move from resource-based economy into the digital era? And it was really interesting when I think about it from where I sit in my chair as a corporate strategist. it's really interesting on trying to make that move, because Nova Scotia, although we have a diversified economy, we still really rely on resource. For example, we just went through a huge, big reinvestment into resource. One of our largest paper mills that employed over 500 people, which is a lot in Nova Scotia, just went out of business. And so we spent a lot of time, a lot of effort to get that resource back up and running, to get those people back to work. But recognizing that there's more important than just resources. We need to move into the digital era. Thank you. So, how do we use these resources? And how do we take advantage of them? Well, in Nova Scotia, we have a number of assets. As a matter of fact, we're very strategically located. We're halfway between, I guess you'd say, the America and in Europe. We're less than, 2 hours flight away from Toronto to New York. We have a lot of dark fiber that runs underneath Nova Scotia. But the interesting point about that is that although we have a lot of dark fiber, we don't really, it's like a highway, a super highway, but we don't have any on-ramps or off-ramps. We have a very high knowledge workforce in Nova Scotia. We have 10 universities and 13 community colleges and university. But the question then becomes, how do we utilize those skills? How do we utilize that knowledge base in moving into the digital era? So I think I'd like to just talk about some of the projects and how Nova Scotia is taking advantage of that. And one of the projects that I think you might find interesting is recognizing that we not only have resources, the resource sector, but other important sectors as well. There's life sciences in Nova Scotia, there's financial services, ICT is huge, but one of the biggest sectors is oceans and oceans technology. And so when you think about Nova Scotia, we have over 7,500 kilometers of ocean. And so it seemed to be really obvious that the oceans technology was a sector that we should really focus on. But we were thinking about that, and when you talk about big data and access to big data, so we didn't actually have that capacity in-house. So we looked outside. We looked to the local analysts that we had and that had access to that data. And so we took it from the perspective of our economic strategy, which is jobs here. And we looked at using the 3 pillars. And those 3 pillars are our skills, and how are we using our skills in the best way? As I said, we're a very knowledge-based economy. Are we being innovative, and how are we using the sector that we have and the resources that we have to be innovative? And our 3rd pillar is focusing on oh my goodness, lost my train of thought, is focusing on exportable services and exporting government and being competitive and our competitiveness worldwide. So we did what we called a deep dive into that data, into that information. And this is kind of what came out of it, which is interesting. It was really huge. There was a lot of data out there. And so what we did was we proceeded to go through those pillars and to sort of sort through that data. Because what's really the most important thing that came out of my conversations was, it's not really the data necessarily that's important, but it's what you do with that data. And how you use it. How do you analyze it? And then once you analyze it, what do you do with the outputs? That's what's really important. Which is a little bit different than, I guess, the natural resource, is you get immediate gratification and money. So one of the interesting things that we did find out about our oceans technology sector was that that it's about 15.5% of our provincial GDP, and that's more than $5 billion a year from oceans-related industries. That some 30,000 Nova Scotians are directly employed in oceans activities. in that drawing about 1.6 billion, and that's direct impact and direct employment. So that's about 6% of the provincial total. But when you can include the spin-off employment, that takes it to more than 10%. So by doing all of this data and analysis, we recognize that, wow, this truly is an important sector in Nova Scotia. It was amazing. So the next step was, well, that's really cool. That's really great to know. So what are we going to do with that? With that information, we developed an Oceans Technology Action Plan. And the best part about that action plan was that it created a collaborative environment, and going through these steps, it created a collaborative environment between our ocean sector, because initially at the outset, we had all of this, but yet everybody was working, doing their own thing, just sort of, doing well. As I said, $5 billion worth. So now we're seeing even more growth. We're seeing more opportunities. We're seeing more collaborations within our oceans technology industry. So as you can see, it's really important. Here's another story. This is a project actually that I was involved in and am involved in, and we're just getting a kickoff to it. And one of the interesting stories I have about this particular project is Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's received, well, you'll have to come and check it out. Lunenburg is a very small town, but it received the UNESCO designation for its heritage. It's a cultural town. It's known for its shipbuilding. It's really picturesque. It's right on the ocean. People love to come and visit there. It's great to stroll along the streets and feel that old world kind of comfort and culture. But the interesting thing about Lunenburg is it also has a very thriving gaming industry there. Who would have thunk it? So we're trying to, I guess, with the gaming industry comes a lot of youth, comes a lot of vibrancy, and the Board of Trade that works within Lunenburg is trying to, get the economy jump-started and saying, the thing is that we can have this old world economy, but we can bring it into the 21st century. In other words, where the old meets new. And so what they're trying to do is the Board of Trade was trying to share with the town how they could take advantage of, of the information and technology. And so they wanted to introduce a smart metering, because smart grids, as you know, provides a lot of data, a lot of information, useful information. Lunenburg is one of the few communities, one of 6 in Nova Scotia, that has their own utilities. So they were the perfect place to start looking and being a pilot project for the smart grid. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do a pilot was to show the rest of Nova Scotia and to show Nova Scotia Power that this is really a great idea and you should jump on board. And I'm just going to share a little bit. You talked about iCanada, and I have to say, when you talk about the sharing of information, iCanada has to be is the star when it comes to that, and I relied heavily on iCanada and the connections that you make through iCanada. And Bill's partner, Barry Gander, I was talking to him, and I had known about a project, and I don't know, Bill, if you're going to talk about this one tonight, in Stratford, Ontario. They had already implemented the Smart Utilities project. So I was trying to convince the mayor of Lunenburg that this is a really great project and you should jump on board. And I said to him, it's okay to say no, but what's not okay is to say no if you don't understand it. And a lot of reasons why people say no is because they don't have the information. They don't have the data. They don't understand what the value is, what the value proposition is. So through iCanada, they introduced the mayor of Lunenburg to the person that's in charge of the utilities, Paul West, in Stratford. Connecting through technology, Paul did a presentation to the council and to some of the staff at Lunenburg, where they were able to share what they had, their accomplishments, and why doing a project such as this would be a really great idea. So right now, we're starting to move Lunenburg into the 21st century, but still keeping that old sort of world charm. And we're pretty excited about that. And I guess the benefit of that is Nova Scotia we have really embraced wind and tidal power and technology. What we really need to do is start moving into smart grids so that we can take advantage of that, all of that information that it provides. And I'm just going to tell very quickly about another project that I'm involved in. And this is one that it was interesting to me because that's where I learned that you can have all the data you want, but if you can't move it around and you can't get affordable access to it, what's the point? And I found it really interesting that we were touting Nova Scotia as having all this dark fiber, and oh wow, we're so well connected. And yes, the province has invested a lot in its infrastructure through the Broadband initiative. But we really don't have access to that dark fiber. As I said, it's like a big highway going past our doorway, and we have no on or off ramp. So what I wanted to do was to study that and to look at, what would be a really good idea for us to get affordable access to the internet, and that was through an internet exchange. So we have engaged somebody to do some research on that, and we're looking at everything from how do we do it, what's the benefits, what's the best model, what's the best governance model. One of the most important and points is, do we look at the American model where it's corporate owned? Do we look at the European model where it's peer owned? And we're just working all through that information right now. And I guess this is a funny slide somebody gave me that I thought was cool. And it just talks about, looking at our connectivity, looking at it, getting reasonable access to the internet, looking at the importance of data, moving from resource-based into the knowledge economy, and looking to hope that we could make Nova Scotia the Atlantic gateway to the digital world. And I thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. You and I are going to have chats about that internet exchange because we got the Calgary Internet Exchange kicked off about 10 days ago.
Oh, cool.
So there's lots of learning. So that's part of the fun of coming to a conference like this. So thanks for that overview. Appreciate it. Next up, we're going to hear from Bill. And Bill is sitting in the middle. That's Bill on screen. Bill Hutchinson is an international business and social entrepreneur and advisor on strategic technology and economic development. He is, deep breath, co-founder and chairman of the iCanada Alliance, executive director of the E&Y Center for Smart City Innovation in Moscow, from where he's joining us tonight. What time is it in Moscow, Bill? I'm thinking Bill may not be able to hear us yet.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Well, we couldn't for about a minute, and then there was sort of something that sounded like an explosion, and we really could. I suspect your volume will be adjusted momentarily. I was just listing off your intro here. You're also board chair of Savvy, a 5-year university, multi-university internet and cloud computing research program led by the U of T. In '98, Bill was elected to the Hall of Fame of the Canadian Information Productivity Awards. In 2005, a panel of business and technology editors recognized him as one of Canada's top 30 movers and shakers in ICT over the past 30 years, which is quite an accomplishment. And in 2006, he received the first Lifetime Achievement Award from the Intelligent Community Forum of New York. And sounds like Bill's already been talking to Nancy, and Bill's been talking to me. And frankly, it's a smallish community once you get going. Hopefully everybody will know each other by the time we finish. So, Bill, you want to take it away? And we've got you targeted for about 12 minutes. Ian asked earlier if he could run over, and I said he could do that at about the rate of $10 a minute. I forgot to tell Nancy that, otherwise it could be cleaning up on the last one. So why don't you take it away, Bill?
Well, good morning, everybody, and good evening to you. I'm 10 time zones to the east, in another country of big oil. Russia economy runs on big oil, and you just heard a speaker from a province with big oil, and she's putting the pipelines all across the province. Of course, we call those the communication networks. One of the challenges today, Megan Hempel has helped me with this testing, and the audio has been great. Unfortunately, the audio isn't too great right now, so I'm having a little trouble hearing from that end. There's a lot of delay. We need to get some new pipelines going here, a little broader bandwidth. I'd like to welcome and say hello to all my fellow panelists, and particularly Nancy. This isn't quite as much fun, Nancy, as the last time we were together. We were sitting on a dock in Halifax, right by the water, having a couple of beers. And I'm still looking for my gear here at 5 o'clock in the morning in Moscow. But nice to see you anyway. You know, it's really interesting that you're having this conference in Alberta, because Alberta has been a pioneer in the oil industry, and Alberta is a pioneer in the information and communications industry. One of the first big gushers, of course, in oil was the Duke. And, you know, Alberta really has done a lot of pioneering things in this whole world as we're evolving to big data. And we're talking today about whether the question of whether big data is the next oil. Well, you got to have a whole ecosystem to really work it. Calgary was the first intelligent community of the year 14 years ago. And you guys have been pioneering ever since. So it's important to think about where we are now. I go along with the idea that big data is the next oil. And in fact have thought of some comparisons between oil and data. So let's think about oil. Well, it's kind of smooth and it's slippery. Well, there's some data that can be slippery too. I have to be careful what I say, but some of the data in Russia can be a bit slippery. We use oil as a lubricant. Well, we use data as a lubricant. We try to use it to make things happen in our companies, in our government, in our society. Oil can be hot. Well, some data can be pretty hot too, depending on what kind of data you're looking at and using. Oil can pollute. Well, some kinds of data can pollute as well. Privacy issues and things like that can pollute your own private life. Oil is gushing all over the place, and we're finding more of it all the time. But I'm not sure that it compares with the gushing that's going on in data. Great story for anybody interested in big data and data scientists in Harvard Business Review this month. Talked about the era of big data. We now are creating regularly, every day, 2.5 billion gigabits of data. That's exabytes. Another new term that we consultants are pretty good at coming up with. And one of the big gushers in the world is Walmart. We're creating 2.5 thousand gigabits, or 2.5 petabytes, of data every hour based on its customer data. So oil is gushing all over the place, and we're creating new tools all the time. I've been very involved in the creation of new tools for a long time. Communications networks, these are the pipelines that are going to move the data around. So, you know, when I chaired the creation of Canary just 20 years ago, wow, we had some pretty small pipelines. In fact, the predecessor to Canary, I was the consultant retained by the National Research Council to create CANet 1 that connected the universities across Canada and the research institutes. Can you imagine that we installed a network that had a 56 kilobit per second line as our national Trans-Canada highway just 25 years ago? Now, this isn't new for all of you people in the audience, but it's important that we realize we're really just on a journey. We're into the early stages of the 21st century, and we're still at the front end, if you can believe it, of all the changes that are taking place in information technology and communications. So we've been digging some wells, to go back to the metaphor, and oil or big data is gushing. That same Harvard Business Review article I just talked about, written by my old friend Tom Davenport, called The Data Scientist, the sexiest job in the 21st century. Well, that's pretty interesting, because, geez, you know what? I gotta just plug my power supply in. Hold on a minute. Should figure out why my screen was starting to fade. I think we're all still on. So, if the data scientist is going to be the next sexiest job of the 21st century, we'll have another one in 20 years. That will be another sexy job, all dealing with data and how we're going to manage it and what are we going to do with it. And of course, we're creating this because now we have so many devices and the Internet of Things and sensors and all the rest of it. But this, of course, there was a great sexy job in the early days of the oil industry. A guy called Red Adair. Who did they call to put out the fires in the oil wells? It was Red Adair. They wrote all kinds of books about him. So you'll hear about some real heroes in the data scientist world in the future. I'm not sure if you can convince the public that being a data scientist is a sexy job, but we in the industry know it's important because the data scientist is coming up with new ways to link industry. An early example was when LinkedIn got going. They weren't doing that well. But a data scientist, an early version, joined LinkedIn and figured out that if we could start to connect possible names and tell you, if you were a member of LinkedIn, that, gosh, you might know the following 4 people. And Amazon did it as well. You know, if you read this book, these other people are reading the same book, so maybe you like the other book that we just came out with that the others are reading. So that was very early examples of starting to use data to connect, to grow business and to make it more competitive. So I think the question of is big oil the next data, I would support the idea. But you know, we keep saying to ourselves, well, we're here now. And I want to go back to the intelligent community and smart city, smart province idea. One of the documents publicized in this conference announced me as the president of iCanada. The presidents do a lot of work. I'm the chairman. I get the glory. Barry Gander, who's in the audience, of course, is the guy that's really doing all the work here. And hi to Barry, and I think Mayor Brad Woodside from Fredericton is there as well. And Brad from Fredericton has done a fabulous job. I think he's been elected 9 times. But in bringing Fredericton into being one of the leading intelligent communities of the year a number of times. So we have, across Canada, a number of cities and towns that are punching above their weight and winning the international awards. I just want to make a comment that it's nice to focus on data. It's nice to focus on the hardware. We've got some great sponsors in the room today that have helped create this conference, and congratulations to the organizers as well. But it's what do we do with it? For many years, we've been using the data we've had, and we've been using the technology we've had to make our businesses more competitive. But we're moving now to the world where we want to make our societies more competitive. And one of the issues we have in Canada is, unfortunately, while we have pockets that are doing great things, and we have some very pioneering broadband initiatives in Alberta. SuperNet, an open access high-speed broadband network, was an innovative idea, and it's helped to spawn a lot of connections all across Alberta. The work Nancy's doing in broadband throughout the province of Nova Scotia is extremely important and very pioneering as well. When you look at Canada as a whole, our innovation index is going down, our productivity index is going down. This is compared to the rest of the world. I got a lot more time and interest talking to the officials of Moscow, who were really starting from way back, than I knew in Toronto, if you can believe it. There's just a tremendous amount of activity here. They're trying to catch up and get ahead. So the purpose of iCanada is to help rally the troops. We punch above our weight nationally, though. The Intelligent Community of the Year award, before announcing the winner, there are 7 finalists. Last year, there were 3 finalists out of the 7 in the world. We've regularly had 2 finalists out of 7 in the world. So we have some communities that are leaders, but we have to get the federal government and all of our regional governments involved as partners in this initiative. And so when iCanada has its summit in a couple of weeks in Montreal, we're putting out a call and we're asking our governors to really get behind the idea that we have to create a national coalition to once again move ourselves to be #1 in the world in communications. We're way down. We just dropped another 4 points. Romania is ahead of us now. So while we have great pockets, and Alberta is a real pioneer in this area, and Nova Scotia is doing a lot, New Brunswick's doing a lot, we're leaving a lot of people behind in Canada, in remote areas, and just in rural areas in some provinces. So, without question, big oil, big data is the next big oil. And there are great parallels. And we've always done very well in the oil and petroleum and fuel industries, and we're pushing in new renewables as well. We're working at the details of data, information, and systems in many places. But as a nation, we're really losing out at the moment, and it's getting very serious. I travel the world, I spend time all over the world, and I can tell you, there's a lot going on, but we have the skills in Canada to do this. We're pulling it together at the cities and in pocket areas. The role of iCanada is to help communities share ideas and really move up. As Barry Gander liked to say, we have a lot of pearls in Canada. We've got to string them together to create a network. So that's what iCanada is doing, but it ties right together with the conference today of question of big data, how are we going to deal with it, and what's the future. So I just want to say how pleased I am to be here. I hope I'll be able to hear the questions all right. There's a lot of feedback coming through. And one of these days, we're actually going to get the broadband really working well. So I hope my lips aren't following my sound or vice versa too much in this presentation. But it's a real pleasure to be here now, and I'll turn it back to the panel and our moderator. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
And your lips weren't noticeably lagging behind, at least until you said that. And as soon as you said that, I started looking, going, maybe like half a second, but it was close. You were coming through loud and clear, so thanks. We'll have a few questions and bring you into the discussion after we hear from the other panelists. So next up, we're going to have Peter. Peter is the interim CEO of Innovate Calgary. Peter, you've been the interim CEO of Innovate Calgary for a while. What's with the interim thing?
About 9 months now.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I think Steve Jobs was the interim CEO of Apple for quite a while, wasn't he?
He only got paid $1, wasn't it, initially?
Yeah, right. So
Something like that.
so this man is apparently working for $1. We should help him out. He spent his entire career in various aspects of commercializing emerging technology. Peter's been Vice President of Wireless Networks R&D for Nortel Networks and CEO of Global Thermoelectric, which is an alternative energy fuel cell company. Since 2003, Peter's been an active investor, business and technology consultant. Were you an inactive investor before that? He's past chair of, and I've got a list, Calgary Technologies Inc., the University of Calgary Engineering External Research Advisory Board, and the U of C's Project Management Advisory Board, and has also served as chair of the Technology Commercialization Task Force on the Alberta Science and Research Advisory Board. So Peter's very well connected, and we're interested to see what you have to say in your 12 minutes on as we get in next oil.
And I'll try to hold to the 12 minutes. Am I okay to walk around with the microphone? Great. Those chairs are way too comfortable, and I'm fighting a bad cold, and I'm afraid I might fall asleep if I stay there too much longer.
While speaking.
The title of the session tonight is Big Data the Next Oil? I'd like to start by going back to July when Marianne Moser first approached me to participate in this evening's event. And I protested. I said, but Marianne, I'm not an oil guy, and although I'm a technology geek, I'm not a data guy. She says, oh, don't worry about it. All you got to do is be a little provocative and stir the pot a little bit, get people talking so that there's something to discuss at the reception afterwards. I said, okay, I think I can handle that. So in terms of oil, I'm not an oil person, but my wife is. My wife's an engineer in the oil industry, so I get dragged out to a lot of company events where I have to pretend I know all about horizontal drilling and SAGD and all of the different issues associated with that. So I've got a little bit of background there. Data, like I say, I'm a tech guy, but I'm not a data person. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the room that have a lot more expertise on data than I do. So I decided I'd take a bit of a different angle here and not talk about technology, talk more about business. And that kind of ties in with where I'm at with Innovate Calgary as well. I thought I'd take a look at oil and data and try and answer the question, is data the next oil? So to start that, we need to understand what is oil, how big is oil, and what is the implication of oil in the global context. So where do you start? Of course, you go to Google. And I thought I'd start with a very simple question to try and answer, and that is, what is the market size of oil globally? And trying to answer that one simple question turned into about an 8-hour search on Google where I got vectored off in 100 different directions, but never did get an answer to the question. Simply because oil in the world is dominated by national corporations that aren't transparent. The 13 largest oil companies in the world are not public companies. They are owned by sovereign states and don't report to anyone on what their earnings are, what their reserves are, etc. So it's almost impossible to get a size out in the oil industry. So I had to back into it, and I started with the question of how much oil does the world produce? And the answer is, in 2012, it's 88 million barrels of oil a day. That works out to about 32 billion barrels a year. And if you run some very sophisticated wild-ass guess math, as I did, that worked out to about $5 trillion a year. Not a bad industry, that's pretty large. So the question is, what's happening with oil as we go forward? The US government publishes a lot of very interesting data, one of which is a World Energy Outlook, and they project that by the year 2035, demand for oil will have gone up by 24% over what it is today. That's growing at about half the rate of energy consumption in total. So although oil is growing, it's losing market share, and that makes sense because we all know natural gas is growing, coal is growing, alternative energy is growing, but oil is still growing overall. So 24% growth on 5 trillion brings you up to about $6.2 trillion by 2035. The really interesting number, though, that I saw was what investment is needed to get oil to that $6.2 trillion a year. $38 trillion of investment is going to be needed over the next 23 years to get oil to that level. That's a phenomenal number, and it reflects the fact that oil exploitation is becoming more and more technology dependent every day. So what are some of the major factors affecting the numbers on that first chart? Clearly, the people that model this sort of thing make all kinds of assumptions about economic activity and growth around the world. The impact of technology change, both on the demand side and on the supply side. And lastly, government policy. You know, we've got this little issue called climate change that is totally inconsistent with what was on the chart before this. In fact, Greenpeace is saying that in order for us to keep to the 450 part per million 2 degrees C growth scenario that everyone's trying to target, total energy growth needs to be less than 10%. And oh, by the way, fossil fuels can't be part of that 10%. There needs to be a reduction. So clearly, your assumptions are a key part of picking numbers for the oil industry. But let's stick with the $5 trillion number for now. So let's turn to big data now. How big is big data? The numbers vary wildly. I picked a number that was published by Deloitte, and they say today it's about a $1 to $1.5 billion a year market. IDC says it's about double that, at $3 billion. Just for fun, I ran a little math to see for big data to become equal to oil, what would the growth rate have to be over the next 23 years? And it worked out to be a compound annual growth rate of 44% for 23 years. I don't know about you, but I don't know very many technologies that can maintain that kind of growth rate for that many years. I've ridden a couple of major technology waves that were running at that kind of a growth rate, but they only lasted less than 10 years. Very, very unusual to try and see something last that long. So the question is really, how big is the market potential for big data? The same Deloitte study predicted that the market potential for big data is $7 billion a year. And the way they calculated that, they said that total enterprise spending on enterprise software was $270 billion a year, and of that, $70 billion was spent on database, ERP, and business intelligence software. Then they made a bit of a leap here, and they said that 90% of enterprises out there don't manage enough data to warrant investments into big data. So they assume 10% of that $70 billion number to come up with $7 billion. So I don't know whether you buy it. I think this is probably a pessimistic estimate. There are others out there using much bigger numbers. EMC's president has said that big data today is a $70 billion a year market, and it's growing at 15 to 20% a year. So there's a lot of variation in numbers here, and I think that reflects the fact that people define big data in different ways and include different things in it. But it also, I think, reflects different visions of what big data can be going forward. So, is big data the next oil? I think I can be pretty confident in saying, no, it's not going to be the next big oil. And frankly, if you spend the 8 hours on the web that I spent, you come to the conclusion that really oil is the next oil. We're not about to run out, and there really is no viable alternative for the transportation sector in spite of all of our desires to have something else. There really isn't. And we can talk further in the reception afterwards if you'd like to debate that. So the question is, what is big data going forward? I think it is very feasible that big data could be the next big technology wave going forward. So I started looking at that postulate and started by looking at what others are saying. And where do you turn to find what others are saying? One of the good spots is to start with the VCs. They're the ones that are putting money behind things. And I found this quote, and I won't read through it. It's the managing director of Bain Capital, one of the large VC firms down in the valley. And in essence, what he's saying is that in the enterprise, different functions have spawned multi-billion-dollar startups in all aspects of the enterprise except for marketing. And he feels that the time is right that big data can be an enabler to create multiple multi-billion-dollar enterprises from startups using big data as an enabler to address the needs of the marketing community. So in his view, big data is the next big technology wave. So the question then is, okay, are the VCs putting their money where their mouth is? And these are the numbers I found. You can see growth year over year here, starting at $1.1 billion in 2009, ramping up to $2.5 billion in 2011. So they are putting their money where their mouth is, and clearly they believe the market is going to be bigger than a few $1 billion if they're pouring this much money into it. So then the question becomes, so why is big data compelling for startup companies? Beyond the fact that VCs are willing to invest in it. And I think it boils down to a few things. Number one, it's market opportunity driven, not technology and IP driven. There will be technology and IP plays in big data, but fundamentally the most interesting part is the market driven part. This directly parallels what we're seeing today with the web and mobile app space. It also leverages previous generations of technology, whether that be the web, the cloud, the wireless networks, the smartphone and GPS capability, and the fact that there's ubiquitous data now. We can talk about exabytes and the generation of data, but clearly there's an awful lot of data out there that there's a real opportunity to extract meaningful information from that mass of data. There's also the view that the supporting technologies are in place. So it's very feasible that a small startup company of 2 young computer science grads can spend 3 to 6 months developing something that could become a billion-dollar enterprise. And that leads into the last point there, the scalability point. The nature of big data is very consistent with web and mobile app development, where it's possible to develop your killer feature set and then deploy it to the world and see your business grow at an exponential level. That's what the VCs are looking for. So where are there opportunities? Basically all aspects of society have lots of data and lots of opportunity. I won't go through the list here. In Canada, Innovate Calgary is hosting Tony Clement on October 19th, where he's going to be coming out and talking about the Open Data Initiative within the federal government, and he wants to talk directly to entrepreneurs, so we're facilitating a session where he can do that. So that's exciting. At the provincial level, I think it's a bit of an open question, and I'm hoping there's some folks here that can answer exactly where we're going in the province. There's some positive comments coming out that we're headed in the right direction. And of course, the oil industry and government have talked about the environmental monitoring program here in Alberta as a big opportunity. So where does this leave startup companies? Startup companies have the opportunity to use the same model we're using in web and mobile app development, starting with a great idea, or what they think is a great idea, build a prototype fast, get customer feedback, iterate, and if you're not right, fail fast, don't spend a lot of time and energy, but pivot. Don't give up, pivot to a new idea or a modified idea, and you may find yourself in a winning position. I couldn't do a presentation without one commercial on Innovate Calgary. We do a lot of work supporting entrepreneurs as they go through this type of thought process. This chart lists the 12 questions that we ask our entrepreneurs to be able to have answers to when they go and make a pitch to investors. This comes out of a program we call our Innovators Toolkit, and really it's about educating entrepreneurs about what investors are looking for. And oh, by the way, we give the same training to the investors, so they're working with the same question list. So that's it for my presentation. I think I've stuck pretty close to the 12 minutes, so I'm not doing too badly. So in summary, is big data the next oil? I don't think it is. Is it a highly important new technology wave? Absolutely. Is it going to be important to the ICT sector? Is it going to be important to society? Absolutely. But oil is still oil.
So I was trying to jam down the notes here. You were being quite provocative with your numbers and such, and I particularly loved the attribution. You had all the attributions out there. One of them was peak era swag, and I like that. There's nothing quite like throwing in a wild-ass guess at some point, a scientific wild-ass guess, because that's really what we're dealing with on a lot of the big data questions, and I think we're going to come to that as we chat in a moment or two. But first of all, we can hear from Ian. Ian Kerr is Canada Research Chair in Ethics, Law and Technology. He's Canada's leading authority on how legal and ethical issues intersect with electronic commerce. And he's following now a second year in a long tradition of kicking off the summit from hearing from a lawyer in the space, Last year we had Michael Geist kick us off, and hopefully Ian's going to make us think just as hard as Michael did. Often the legal and ethical side of the discussion is every bit as fascinating and really sort of makes you step away from the problem and think, yeah, but if we did this, that's going to happen, and then this, and you've got all the building blocks. So Ian plays a significant role in the development of national and international laws in e-commerce, privacy policy, and digital copyright reform, all hot issues. He's advised various Canadian agencies on legal policy for online activities, and has served as the Canadian delegate to the United Nations Special Working Group on e-commerce. Ian teaches at the University of Ottawa, where he co-designed a new graduate program in law and technology. And I love the sound of that, Ian. I wish I'd been able to take that one, because this is just a fascinating area. So we've already negotiated our overtime charge. Take it away, my friend. See if you can hit the 12 minutes, we're going to start charging you after that.
I've got some money in my pocket. Thank you very much, Robin. In 1997, at a well-known tech conference called Comdex, the legendary Bill Gates took a bit of a cheap shot at the automobile sector and by extension the energy sector. Said Gates, and I'm quoting, "If General Motors had kept up with technology like the computer industry has, we'd all be driving $25 cars that got 1,000 miles to the gallon." He didn't just make those numbers up, he actually correlated the decreasing cost of personal computers and the efficiency that was increasing with computational processing. Although General Motors' PR department decided not to take a formal response, the internet itself did. Here is some of the user-generated parody that ensued. If General Motors had developed technology like Microsoft, for no reason at all, your car would crash twice a day. Every time they repainted the lines on the road, you'd have to buy a new car. The airbag would say, "Are you sure?" before going off. And occasionally, for no reason, your car would lock you out and refuse to let you in until you'd simultaneously lifted the door handle, turned the key, and grabbed the radio antenna. Okay, so the competition between oil-driven production and data-driven productivity did not start with Bill Gates, and certainly does not end with him, and so we ask, is data the next oil? I flew here from Ottawa to contribute to your thinking about how to answer that question. Why did I do that? Now, when I ask that question, I don't mean, why did I accept the gig? Step outside of this building, at least in daylight, and you'll see exactly why I did. But that is an easy one to answer for that reason. But really, if you think about it, why did we, collectively in this room, choose to burn a bunch of carbon emissions so that a few people could stand up and convey information here in the flesh? If data, plain and simple, is the next oil, why didn't we all, like our colleagues, Skype in or use some other intangible data-driven platform rather than the oil-driven platform that brought most of us here? Well, of course I'm being rhetorical, and it's not that simple. After all, neither Air Canada's refueling agent nor the pilot that flew the plane that I was on, nor the pilot that I flew the plane, rather a computer did. Really all the pilot did was tell me what the weather was going to be like in Calgary. And I spent the entire flight myself toggling between my iPad, my MacBook Pro, and Air Canada's quaint little computer built into the front of the seat. So let my trip here be a metaphor for this reality. Oil-driven industries could barely function these days without information technology, which was a point that was just made. And likewise, our current information technology systems could not be built or function without oil or diesel. So let's be clear, the question does not admit of a dichotomy. So recognizing the interdependence, what do we want to say about this? Is data the next oil? My answer is yes and no. I'm a law professor. When I sat down to think about this with Diana Cooper and Dana Antackley, two of my research assistants who provided some awesome food for thought in this, we realized the startling number of points of connection.